Hey, you guys, welcome back to Brownie's Judgment. I'm your host, Julie, and today I wanted to talk about what to do when you feel lost. I have about 5 pieces of advice that we could go in and kind of evaluate this because no matter what age you are, we can all feel lost from time to time and we can lose connection with ourselves and with the people around us because we can overthink about what exactly our purpose is and what we're supposed to be doing on this earth, what is the meaning of life, and all of those really hard questions that it seems like no one really has the answer for. So, number one, I would say to get into the word, into the word, into the Bible. And I would also say, like, another really big thing for me that I always have learned that has helped me is by, listening to podcasts as well and just really just learning from other people and their experiences that are older because oftentimes we can feel lost no matter what age, like I mentioned, but it feels like no matter what we do, like even if we're moving, like it feels like nothing is progressing, if that makes any sense. And that's why I say, whenever you dive into things that give clarity, like such as the word, and hearing from others that can really help individuals truly understand what it is exactly about how they're approaching this feeling of being lost and understanding more about the root of where that truly comes from. Because if we can't get out of the scope of how we understand things and whatnot from our own perspective, right? Sometimes we just need perspectives outside of that. And I think that as long as we're careful about what we invite in and allow ourselves to understand, I would say that um, that's when we can have more of that clarity. Number two is to evaluate your feelings. How can we get to where we need to or want to be if we have all of these emotions underneath that we're not addressing? And I mean that in a way that sometimes, like if we have the goal to, let's say, be an Olympic runner, but there's no energy for it because of the lack of a proper diet or, a regular exercise routine, and this person is nowhere near even at least starting that routine, then it's going to make it near impossible. And of course, that person's going to feel lost because the connection of where they are and where they want to be is not at all interconnected whatsoever. And so, the reason why I say evaluate your feelings is because oftentimes, whenever we are going through a difficult time, emotionally, mentally, whatever, spiritually, um, it can be really hard to kind of really sit down with our goals and make them happen if there are certain emotions that are underneath that hinder those steps from happening, if that makes any sense. Like, um there are things that, depending on the person, may seem harder to do than others, and those harder things get even harder whenever the stakes are high. And I think feelings are something that come and go, obviously, right? But yet, why do they affect us so much when they do? Like, why, when a huge wave of sadness comes or anxiousness, it can paralyze us. And there's obviously, there's anger and everything else. But I think that depending on the circumstances of our life and the environment around us, it can really alter our success. A perfect example is, a child who normally does really well in class, and then whenever they come face to face with an exam, they get really nervous and then get questions wrong that they otherwise wouldn't have had, like on a normal day-to-day basis. So if it's just for a test, imagine how it would be for, I don't know, like, let's say for instance, somebody's, I'm just saying this because of the month, but let's just say someone's really interested in getting back into dating and stuff like that again. But if there are feelings of self-doubt and feelings of um, insecurity, it's going to make it harder to attain that goal, right? Of getting back out there, because those thoughts of, oh my goodness, like this person has to see me vulnerably, or I don't want them to see how they actually see, I don't want them to actually see me how I see myself, then of course it's going to make it nearly paralyzing to even make that step. So little examples like that I give because I don't know your specific circumstance. Of course, you're always feel free to, but I guess I'm just trying to give the perspective as to why it's so important to address like those inner feelings and those inner thoughts within us before, not necessarily that we can, before we can even like do anything productive, but rather just to evaluate to see if there's any of, of those emotions or thoughts that may be limiting you, if that makes any sense. So like I said, number one, get into the word, or just surround yourself with valuable information. And then number two is evaluate your feelings. Now, number three is to reconnect with what you love. And I say this because when we feel lost, it can feel like nothing makes sense and that it's hard to reconnect with oneself. And that's the reason why I say that it's good to, dive into those habits, or good ones, of course, but in those environments and those hobbies and those passions that we have deep within us that make us happy. And if you don't have any of those, because for a very long time that was the case for me, um, it makes feeling lost even harder to get out of. And I would say that if that isn't you, if you don't have something that you're passionate about in the sense of that you can dive yourself into and that you get lost and everything, I would say find that. You know what I mean? Like, I think that not only information, not only evaluating your feelings, but truly having something that you can look forward to, even if it's not every single day, but at least sometime during the week, maybe a couple times or so, that's going to help you build more trust within yourself and feel like you're getting somewhere, even if you feel lost. So that's why I recommend that for sure. Number four, I would also say to ask God to help you find your purpose. I think that oftentimes we feel that when we don't have a purpose, it feels like we're living day to day aimlessly. You know what I mean? And that's a very scary and paralyzing thought, because oftentimes when you're just living day by day, what is the meaning of life? That question can surface so easily. And I, for so long, didn't really know my purpose myself. But whenever I just like laid it down and I told God, I said, listen, I said, God, I don't know what I'm doing. Even to this day, I have those thoughts from time to time. I'm so lost. I don't exactly know what it is I'm supposed to help others accomplish, or what I'm supposed to do on this earth. Can you help me? Can you point me in the right direction? Can you present the right people and the right opportunities in my path so I can align closer with that? Because I'm a big believer in that our stories are written, prior. And I think knowing that is scary, but also not, because it makes me feel a sense of peace in a way. Because when I know that my destiny has already been written out, and no matter how much I detour or make mistakes or doubt myself or invite the wrong people in my life and learn from that and just keep rolling with the punches, as you say, I'll eventually get to where I need to be. And I'm a strong believer in that for you as well. Because take it from someone that whose teen years and early 20s were full of nervousness, insecurity, uh, confusion. Confusion was a very big one for me. Comparison, that was a big one too. And I would say I have a little bit more footing in my life now compared to how I used to. And all of that has to do with me surrendering what I want, because I realized that I was being selfish in a way in regards to how I was approaching my life with other people, because I was so busy worried about what do I need to do? How am I going to accomplish this? Um I have this deadline or whatever, and then it made me lose track of the connection of others around me because I was so worried and caught up in doing what I needed to get done. Finally, number 5 is to hear from people who are doing what you're interested in and see what you think about it. So it kind of goes back to number 1 as far as getting information, getting into the word, growing as a person. But number 5 is more in the sense of educating yourself. Of course, podcasts can give you advice as far as getting out of the feeling of feeling lost in the word. But number 5 kind of recommends more along the sense of career wise, because if you're interested in a career, who is the best person to hear and learn and experience, and through their experience understand what the field is somebody who's already in it. And this is something that I've even done, like, and though I think the reason why I got into this mindset so early on is because of a project I had to do during my first semester of college. It was called like the Pechacucha project or something like that. I don't know. But part of the assignment was to actually interview somebody who was in the career field that you're interested in. I remember I went back to my high school and I interviewed my old science teacher. He was my ninth grade science teacher. And I think it's just so humbling and nerve-wracking at the same time, but also very exciting, because if you're careful about who you choose, they'll give you the raw, honest truth, and that can be something that can be a little scary, and that's exciting because of the fact that this person may or may not how to do it alone, and they're willing to sit down and tell you their experience. And I think that that's like the perfect way to really understand if what you're interested in works or not. And honestly, this can go for anything. I'm sorry, I know I'm talking a lot about career, but it seems like the most practical thing. um but this, like I mentioned relationships a little bit too, like for instance, talk to somebody who's in a relationship that you look up to. um when it goes to work, same thing, somebody who's well, that's what I already said, but even school, right? You're thinking about going to college or whatever, talk to somebody at the university or a student at the university. Like there's like so many different avenues in the sense of where somebody could give you advice in a path that you're trying to go in life. And it's just be humble enough to be willing to learn from other people. And most importantly, accepting if it's not something that you end up wanting. Just be glad that you learned before you entered it. You know what I mean? So I'm just going to go through the points really quick. Number 1, like I said, get into the word and any informational advice that you could get. Number 2 is evaluate your feelings. Number 3, connect with what you love. Number 4, ask God to help you find your purpose. And number 5, hear from people who are doing what you're interested in and see what you think about it. That's going to be the end of our episode for today. Thank you so much for listening in and spending your time here on Brownie's Judgment. Catch you guys in the next one, and as always, God bless.